Dick Bolles and Richard Leider are two of the best-known life-work planning coaches in the country. Bolles is the author of the best-selling What Color Is Your Parachute series. Leider's a best-selling author in his own right, with 30 years of experience coaching people to live and work with a sense of purpose. Leider also is the chairman of the Venture Group, which consults with large corporations on executive development and life planning. Leider's just published a new book called Something to Live For: Finding Your Way in the Second Half of Life. The two came to Chicago recently together to conduct a 2-day life planning seminar. I had a chance to sit down with them while they were in town to talk about their careers, the nature of life transition, and how boomers plan to do retirement differently.
When you first start out in this field, your general entrance is through trying to help somebody find a job. And then you start to realize, well, I shouldn't just be helping them with that. I should be focused further down the road than just headlight range with them. And so you start to get into career planning, which is, what are you going to do after you're doing what you're doing now? And then when you get into career planning where you're looking further down the road, you start to say, well, why do I restrict this looking further down the road to just careers? Why not talk about the issues that come up with careers, which is lifestyle and decisions about what kind of footprint people want to leave on the earth after they're gone. And so that's how, inevitably, when you come into this field, you don't stay just with career development. If you do, that's because you've chosen deliberately to do that. There's sort of a tide that sweeps you into much broader concerns. And for as long as I've been in this field, I mean, my second book was called An Introduction to Life Work Planning, and that's always how I've identified my field. So it's natural that it includes, and as you get older and get nearer to 50 plus or get beyond it, as in my case, you get an avid interest in helping particularly people who are wrestling with those issues that you have been wrestling with in your own life. So just getting older gets you inevitably into dealing with 50 plus.
Mm-hmm. And at 29, I became interested in the second half of life for several reasons. One is, if you're going to be in a career, what happens to you when you're done? And so I was very interested in why so many people died when they retired. That was one thing. And secondly, and my own father was one of those people who planned and schemed and retired and died 2 years later, and sort of freaked me out. But I also, at the age of 29, got a fellowship to study adult development in the second half of life. And it was at Harvard Business School. It was part of the longest standing study on adult development in the world, called then the Grant Study, now the Harvard Study of Adult Development. So I was very curious early on about why people choose what they do, live 60% of their life working, and pay that kind of price. So it was a very early on thing for me, and I've had my eye on that long-range aging thing since I was quite young. The transition involves the whole person in one's social structure, one's relationship structure, one's identity, one's time structure. Lots of things go into that. And where do you go to get an advanced degree in maturity? Where do you go to learn how to do this? Well, you don't. Most people think it'll be easy, and for some it is, for most it isn't. Managing that transition. So the whole business of reinventing or figuring out who you're going to be, where do you go for help? That's navigating new territory for most people.
There's a rising tide among the baby boomers coming into retirement where they're examining it much more. I mean, look at the literature, how many books there are now about 50 plus and so on, compared to how many there were, say, even 10 years ago. It's like a tidal wave now, because the baby boomers have been a group that people have focused on for so long, and now they're saying, well, now what's happening to them? And so they help to produce the literature that helps to produce the self-examination and therefore more taking control. So I think what's different is the baby boomers. They've made a difference.
And I would pile onto that by saying that I'm finding that they're not one group. They're quite a complex group.
I agree.
With different slices depending on which end of the baby boom generation they're on, etc. So I think they see it as a grand experiment, and they're going to reinvent retirement or that phase of life that they did everything else in their wake. So that's the first point. Second point in the simplistic terms is I divide it into money, medicine, and meaning. This whole retirement second half of life, just in the most simplest way. Money is, they've got a lot of concerns about money, and you write about that. And, so that's kind of their first way in, is will I have enough, and how much is enough, and all of the fears around Social Security. Then there's medicine, because ultimately they're going to have medical incidents so they're interested in medicine, and medicine meaning fitness, everything to do with health. Then the third thing that they're now opening up is meaning. So money, medicine, meaning. What am I going to do? Who am I going to be? I'm going to live 30 bonus decades, or 3 bonus decades, 30 years. What am I going to do? And how am I going to do it? So the whole question of why do I get up in the morning, or meaning, is now hitting the boomer lexicon or vernacular, I think. And that's, they're looking at themselves more whole now, starting from the outside and moving to the inside.
Yeah, retirement was, it meant by definition giving up work and going to do what you always wanted to do with your life at last. And now I think with the economics of our civilization and the globalization as well, this is going to be a very different ballgame. A lot of them are going to be working. I mean, I'm 81 and I'm still working, and I'm emblematic of that kind of trend. I don't think that I should get to a point where I say, oh, I don't want to work. I always want to work. I think the major issue they face if they look hard in the mirror is boredom. You know, that's the terror they have. They've been active all their lives, particularly this coming generation that's coming just now into 50 plus. They've all their lives been very active, and their horror is that I get to a certain age where I'm just absolutely bored. So that's the doorway through which I see them coming to meaning. They say, I've got to be doing something meaningful with my life at this point. Not just because I'm this age doesn't mean I should pull up the covers over my head and resign from the human race.
Or just because I should do it, because I have free time. And I think that same thing exactly, but my language is slightly different, and that is, I think the biggest hunger right now is for community. And community means people, not community like I want to go live in Sun City or something like that. But what people, isolation is fatal. And I learned this through my work at the Mayo Clinic, that people that go home and recover from an illness and do it alone don't do it nearly as well as those that go home and have community or have family or somebody there. Well, same is true with the whole aging process, that people are looking for all new kinds of community, that which is relationship with others. And work is one of the biggest places for that community to happen, and it's work.
Are there particular life events that trigger people to spark people to start thinking about these questions?
Oh, you better believe it.
Death,
that's the key. Really, that's where they start.
Yeah, why conversation about purpose with someone in the second half of life is usually, not always, usually a richer one than someone in the first half. Why? Because they're closer to determinants, the reality of that. And they may have had a divorce, may have had an illness, they may have lost a job. Pain, again, is the revealer of true essence, which is where meaning and purpose emerges from. So.